What if you could learn from physical product entrepreneurs that have risen up from the trenches to dominating their market by creating successful physical product brands? Well, this podcast is hosted by me, Kunle Campbell, and it's about breaking the mold to becoming a smarter, savvier, and better product entrepreneur. You discover how to take physical products from concept through launch and to scaling up from physical product entrepreneurs who've taken their revolutionary ideas to 1 million, 10 million, and 50 million plus in revenue businesses. You'll also join me on my journey to build $1 million physical product brand business in a year, where we both will learn about crowdfunding, selling to retail chains, launching through marketplaces like Amazon, strategic partnerships, publicity, celebrity endorsements, and selling direct to consumers. So if you're creating or building a brand in the consumer packaged goods space, in fashion and apparel, business products, or any physical product niche, listen in because we have you covered. Join the fast track to physical product business success. This is the Physical Product Business Podcast. I'm Kunle Campbell. Let's get rolling. Hi guys, welcome to the Physical Product Business Podcast. As you know, this is the sister show to the 2X e-commerce podcast for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs only. We talk about success stories, we talk about how to actually take your product to market or how to scale your product to market if it's already in market. Now today, I'm going to take something slightly different. It's a slightly different approach on today's show. That's because I'm talking about, you always hear about successes. You know, you listen to every single podcast and everyone's talking about, you know, how they're here, how they were, you know, there before and how they've managed to scale and build companies. And it takes a lot of guts to come out to talk about your failures, you know, and I want to bring someone, well, the guest on today's show is going to talk about his failures from the point of view of building a drinks, you know, brand for it was an energy and a sports drink brand. And what you guys are going to learn pretty much is what not to do, basically. Before I get into the show, I'd like to introduce Tyler. Tyler, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So at the minute, you run one of the most popular blogs on bikes in general. But prior to this journey, you built out an energy drink brand, which you're here to talk about. Could you take a minute to introduce yourself, you know, just giving us your more or less evolution to where you are now? In just a minute, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the super quick version of it.
Okay.
I grew up in a family who was into advertising. My dad started an ad agency the year I was born. And so by the time I got to high school and college, in the summers, I would be working there from everything from, you know, cleanup to eventually doing graphics and some account exec stuff. A little bit after I graduated from college, I was there as an account executive, and one of the clients was this vitamin supplement company. And so I started working with them and talking to them about how they did it, and found out that, you know, they just had an idea. They had a couple of doctors put together some formulas, and then they were having it made for them. And this opened my eyes to a whole new world. At the time, I was also very into mountain biking and doing some races, and what I noticed at the races were a lot of athletes were taking Coke or Mountain Dew and watering it down, or just letting it go flat, and then chugging that for this last lap kind of sugar caffeine rush. At the same time, those that were using Gatorade, which was everybody knows Gatorade, but they were watering it down and diluting it like 50-50 because it was too sweet and too acidic to drink full strength when you're, you know, at max output in an endurance race. And so it got me thinking. I was like, all right, what if there was a sports drink that had a little bit of caffeine and no citric acid? And so that was how I came up with the idea for a sports drink. And get into more of the details later about the naming and everything. But eventually, it was an okay product. It gained distribution and got into mail order catalogs. And eventually we were like, oh, this is still a niche product. Let's go big. Let's do energy drinks. You know, Red Bull's just come into the U.S. and Coke and Pepsi have one, but that's it. Small market right now, but the margins are insane. And so we jumped into that, kind of just the sports drink, went into energy drinks. And
so you had two brands. This is back in when, 2002?
Yeah, 2002 is when we really kicked off the energy drink.
2002. Okay, so your idea came in 2000. You were
started in 2000.
You were a cyclist, enthusiast. Did you race at the time, or were you a spectator?
I raced, but not very.
You race. Okay.
Not at high level.
No worries. Okay, so you and it just shows with regards to what you're doing now, which is the blog bikerumor.com. Okay, so you had the idea. So in 2000, did you have a brand, a tangible product, to market? Had you taken the first brand to market? Or what was the name of the first brand, the sports, drink?
So it was called Propel for about 1 month. We got really lucky in that we trademarked that right before, like literally days before Quaker Oats had. And so they ended up buying the trademark off of us, and that gave us very low six figures, and it let me quit working for my dad and kind of go off and pursue this full time on my own. So that
lovely.
I was lucky, and we just changed the name. It had only been out for a month, so there was really no brand equity.
So it was Propel, and then you changed it to what?
Pro Light.
Pro Light. Okay. So Pro Light was so how popular was Pro? So how did you get to who made it for you? How did you work with a consultant, with a nutritionist, or do you have some nutritionist background? What did you do to build out Pro Light?
I did a lot of research on my own for ingredients, and had been for a long time, trying to make myself faster, when the reality is I should have just trained more, but I was trying to look for the quick fix with nutrition. And
as always.
I already had done a ton of research on ingredients for my own personal interest, and then it was just a matter of finding somebody who could order in these raw ingredients and blend it into a sports drink. And it's pretty easy. You can get anything made for you really easily.
Okay, so you went to a factory and you got to prototype. You worked on the brand. Did you work with a marketing agency on the brand, or consultant on the brand?
No, that's the kind of stuff I've been doing all along.
With your dad's agency, right? Okay. So you that was super easy for you with the packaging and all. Did you have a single sort of size, or did you have varied sizes?
It was a powder mix. So it was the big tub of.
Okay. So which you just pour in your flask and mix with water. Okay. All right. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And then how long did the Pro Lights, so what were the initial challenges getting Pro Light to market?
Honestly, just getting it to market, it wasn't hard in that, I was friends with the guys at the local bike shop. So once I had product in, it was just taking it in, getting some of the local shops to carry it, and then we'd go to the local. I was living in Florida at the time, so we were taking it around to area bike shops, and then we'd go to the state series mountain bike races, and introduce it to athletes and shop owners there. And so it grew just kind of like that, like us calling on shops then, and eventually we were able to talk performance bike and another one called Personal Best Nutrition into carrying it, and they had their national catalogs.
Okay. Did you get, besides the national catalogs, did you get any national distribution with retailers?
Only from direct shipping. We didn't have a distributor.
Okay.
Selling. Well, no, I take that back. We did actually. We had KHS Bicycles had it in their catalog.
Okay. So you'd built it out. What kind of sales were you doing in 2002? When it was more mature?
Not much. I really don't remember. It was. Okay.
So it was a slog. It was a tough slog.
Profitable, but it wasn't. Nobody was getting rich.
Okay, rewinding back to 2002, what would you have done better to getting it to market?
Oh man. Well, so the sports drink actually launched in 2000, and then mid 2002 is when we transitioned to the energy drink.
Gotcha. Okay.
With the sports drink, like back then, I don't really know. I mean, we didn't. This was pre-MySpace back then, really. So, there was no social media. Getting the word out was something back then. It was a totally different game than today. So we did a tiny bit of print advertising in one of the biggest magazines, and it was a complete waste of money because it was I think we paid $4,000 for an 8-page ad in the back, and we could afford to do that twice.
Yeah.
It was just money flushed down the toilet.
It needs to be sustained if you're going to do if you're going to do print. Okay, so so that happened. So if you were to do it today, how would you have done things differently?
There's a lot of cyclists out there who have great personalities online and are, very active on social media, very active at the events, and, just popular people that everybody loves free stuff, right? So you just kind of see the product out there with them, and if they like it, great. If they don't, it's whatever. There's a lot of athletes out there. So it's easy to see the product now and get this recognition through them to their audience, and then just kind of grow that. And then even with social media, like there's so much you can do just to reach people.
Influencers, I suppose, as you just alluded to, influencers, and then probably, amplifying via social, via paid social, eventually once they start to show your products, to their followers, it's a totally different world now. We live into 2000 as the MySpace 2000. Okay. Right, so the energy drink, it started out in late 2002. Did you sort of launch it side by side did you sort of taper down on the first brand, on ProLite, and did you just focus all of your energies on the energy, drink?
Yeah, we thought about taking ProLite and making a ready-to-drink version so that we could sell that in convenience stores, and then we realized we'd be going up against Gatorade, which... it would be foolish. And so I was almost as foolish, but we just didn't realize it at the time, was, hey, well, let's just go up against Red Bull, which at the time wasn't quite the juggernaut it is today, but it was still, they had been around in other countries for years and they had their system down. And, but like I said, there's only a handful of energy drinks at the time. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal story, Red Bull. I was reading a book, something got to do with billionaire mindset or something like that, and they're talking about the founder of Red Bull and how Red Bull he was like working in an advertising agency. Basically, he went to Thailand or the Far East or Japan, one of them, Thailand actually, for holidays, and they had an energy drink that tasted like crap, and he was like, and it was really big in Asia, and he just thought, this doesn't exist in Europe. I think it was German, and he brought it to market, and obviously it's been around since the 90s or 80s, and it was a slow burn initially, but it just kept at it. And
what's weird is if you find Red Bull in some of the Asian countries, or even not so much Europe anymore, it's all the same, but there's still Red Bull you can find in little glass vials and jars, and it tastes different. It's either not carbonated, there's different variations depending on where you are.
Interesting. Okay, so what was the name of your energy drink in 2002?
So we called it Burn. Thinking, energy to burn.
Yeah, makes sense.
Play on words.
What was it consist? Was it like a Red Bull caffeinated, energy drink, just like Red Bull, or?
Yeah, same idea. We had we launched in the small cans initially, the Red Bull size cans. And it had about 50% more caffeine, a lot more vitamins, and then it actually tasted really good. So if you want to know exactly what it tastes like, go get the yellow summer edition Red Bull right now, and it's literally like verbatim flavor-wise.
Really? Okay, I shall try that. I'll try that out. Okay, so what lessons did you take away from ProLite to make Burn as a potential success in 2002?
Man, it was such a different market. I mean, everything about it was different. You went from having a powdered mix that you mixed to a ready-to-drink product. It was really just a completely different company. Different retailers. Like, we had some bike shops that would carry Burn because of our relationships, but in our mind, we went from something that we actually kind of were super passionate about to looking at the dollar signs. And it was, so that was really probably the first mistake was, there's just bigger market potential here. We could make a lot more money. And it's, for me, the challenge was creating a good product. And once that challenge was over, then it was like, I just had no idea what I was doing, trying to sell something into an industry I never understood. And I sent you a bullet point first, and we can start diving into all the, I've got a lot of bullet points on my notes here next to the video screen.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about so what were your initial promotional plans? How did you start? What was your distribution like for the energy drink for Burn Energy?
Well, we did start right off the bat with bike shops because we already had some ins there for sure. The next step was just starting to call local distributors, trying to find somebody that could get it into the stores. Or actually, first we even just did self-distribution. So like by this time I was living in North Carolina.
Okay.
So I was loading up the back of my Expedition with cases, going around store to store to store, all the convenience stores and gas stations, just trying to get people to carry it. And
okay.
Eventually, once we had like some base level of distribution that way, then we could go to a distributor and say, hey, look, we've got 50 stores in this area, would you guys pick it up?
Okay. And did you do that? Did you eventually get a distributor? Did you get 50 stores to pick it up?
Yeah, we did. We had decent distribution here in our home area, and then we would push into some of the other areas in North Carolina. Eventually, and this was another mistake we made, we had distribution in like 13 states total, but it was a pocket here, a pocket there. Like our biggest market was probably the greater St. Louis area,
right,
where we managed to find a couple different distributors over the years. And I actually got into Quick Trips for a little while, which is a pretty big chain of C-stores up there. But it was like scattered all over the country, and there was just no way to support that. But
okay, so what would you have done better? Would you have got a channel manager? Would you have gotten regional reps at each in each region? How would you have played it if you were to do it again?
I wish I knew, honestly. That was one of the things that really hurt us, was like I had no idea how the beverage industry works. And to be honest too, at some point you realize, okay, you need a good sales manager, but we never had the funds to afford that. So yeah, I think having somebody that understands the industry, that's a good sales person, would have been key. And we definitely lacked that. I did have a sales guy out in California, Northern California, to try and handle that, because we had 2 or 3 different distributors up in that area, just right around the Bay Area. So we had that, and it was, whether or not he was any good is a different story. But yeah, I mean, it definitely made it possible to have distribution out there.
Yeah. I also had a lady, Judy Bouchard. She was on, I think, episode 6 of the podcast, and she managed to get her Relish brand, it's a condiment brand called Slawsaw, into 8,000 stores. It was a burn. I think she's been running the business for like 4 or 5 years, and she managed to get it into 8,000 stores. But one thing she did say, I asked her about a single piece of advice to physical product entrepreneurs, especially in the food sector, food and drink sector, was that she said that it's really important to get a mentor. Did you have one? She said the mentor will help you not make mistakes, and the mentor is someone who's done what you're about to do or something similar. And even if it's like an hour a month you have with a mentor, where you kind of you lay out your plans, and then they give you targets and steer you in the right direction. It really changed her business, and I think she's a mentor to other businesses. Do you agree? And do you think if a mentor could have steered you in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads to like a couple of points that I had written down here that I wanted to share was, not only did I not have any kind of mentor or anybody guiding me through this industry, teaching me about the industry, the ins and outs, is I either got no advice on a lot of important things, or I got really bad advice on a lot of things. And that started even with the sports drink. And I can give you as many examples as you want.
Okay.
Just cut me off when you want me to stop.
Okay.
So a couple of the big ones, though, were like when we sold the trademark for Propel, we had a good bit of money sitting in the account, right? Well, nobody, and my accountant knew that, my investors knew that. I had a couple of friends and family investors at the time that had chipped in enough just to let us get those first production runs done.
Equity investors or debt?
Yeah, so cash. So they invested cash, and then they had a little bit of ownership in it.
Okay.
And so people knew, the people who understood the books, like they knew what was going on. And so one piece of advice I got from my accountant was, "Oh, well, just pay off that expedition." So I'm like, okay, and this was from my accountant at the time.
Right.
So I did, and that was, I don't forget what it was, 10 or 15 grand, just this chunk of money gone. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year, income tax came due. I'm like, well, I could have really used that money to pay the income tax, because also nobody said, hey, you need to set some of that aside because you just had this huge influx of income. You're going to owe taxes on that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it might be incredibly naive, and I might sound like an idiot to say, but it never dawned on me that, I'm going to have to pay some taxes on this. And then so the other piece of advice that this one was, you could see the good and the bad, and it was, well, hey, you've got this capital now, you really don't need these investors anymore. Why don't you just buy them out? Because we were talking about, I think maybe it was 15, 20 grand of total cash investment. And so it wasn't any harm in buying them out and regain total control myself, which was fine. The upside with that was when I went back to these people to invest in the energy drink, they were like, yeah, I mean, heck, you did so great the first time, let's go. But the downside was, again, that was cash that was taken out of the company and never to be seen or used again.
Cash flow is super important.
Yeah. And it's, learning that the hard way is okay, so that and a lot of the other things I did with the energy drink down the road is why I'm incredibly frugal with Bike Groomer now, is because I don't want to get rid of cash for stuff that has no measurable, gain at the short term or even medium term, right?
Yeah.
So those were the big ones to me. Was and even it came down to time and time again with the energy drink, is there were a lot of stupid things we did with our money. We thought one of the big popular things at the time when we had the energy drink going was drifting, and it hit the audience right. The people who are drinking energy drinks are were teenagers and 20 somethings. And this is right when Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift came out, and the drift racing scene was getting televised coverage and all this. So we're like, we need a little tuner car. We need to get into this. So we had our Ford Focus wagon that we were using for deliveries. Well, we decided to tune that thing. So it had the exhaust, the engine mods, lowered rims, the Lambo doors that went up like that. It was absolutely ridiculous, right? And fully graphic, completely wrapped and stuff. So we managed to get a lot of that stuff from the brands for putting their logos on it for free, but we still had to pay for some of it.
Yep.
And we thought, oh, all right, well, we've got this car, so we're going to take it around the car shows. We were taking it to car shows in areas where we had no distribution. We would sample it and people would love it, and then they couldn't turn around and buy it. It was just
that was clever marketing, really. Kitting out a car. It was clever. It's just the follow through. Which you just said with regards to going to. So you got passionate about drifting and forgot about the business more or less. Okay, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Any other major regret, or well, not regrets, but outcomes of bad advice you can give? Yeah,
I mean, again, this was people who. So when we had the energy drink, we had a lot more investors. I think all told, over the years, people had invested close to $400,000 in that, and this was all friends and family. There were no institutional investors. So the first, probably biggest, worst piece of advice was when we launched this. Nobody ever said, I mean, from the most basic level, right? I had QuickBooks. I was using QuickBooks, and I tried to set up QuickBooks for an inventory-based company, which was a nightmare. So bad. And so when we started the energy drink, I started from scratch, and I tried to get our accountant to help me set this up, and it was just we'll just set it up like before or whatever. There was no hey, yeah, let me set your QuickBooks up for you from the beginning so that it works like it should for an inventory-based company. And then years down the road, I tried again. We got a new accountant, and I was set this up for me, and it was just this jumble of not doing it. And so the books were always a mess. But when we had some of our bigger investors come on board a few years into it, I mean, these were people that had invested, $100,000 or a little bit more. We would show them the books. They requested to see the books at least quarterly. So I would send them to them, and they'd be looking at the things I was doing and how I was spending the money for marketing. And nobody ever said, hey, hold on a second. Like, maybe you shouldn't do this, or let me make some suggestions, or why are you doing this? There was almost no questioning of.
So where did they pay attention to over your meetings, over your updates, or in your books when you sent them your books?
I don't know. I mean, it was almost, and not to throw anyone under the bus, because I love these people, but it was almost as though it was an exercise in seeing if I would do it. There was not any real actionable advice or valuable advice I was getting from these people. And to be honest, these were all people that, if they lost this money, this was probably like gambling, right? They could afford to lose it, and they thought it was interesting what I was doing. They liked me. So maybe it wasn't that important to them if this worked out. And I think they were hoping it would work out more because they wanted to see me succeed than it did the matter to them.
Than the returns. Yeah. Okay.
But still, like another instance with the cars. So we were going down to Texas. We had a tiny bit of distribution in Texas. And so we're thinking, oh, well, it's Texas. And besides the fact that our other big vehicle is like a beat up Ford Windstar that looked terrible, we're like, oh, we need a truck. We need a nice promo vehicle. Let's get a pickup truck. We'll, again, wrap it. I'm like, so we buy a brand new truck and made some upgrades to it. And we're sitting there showing up at events in this thing that we could barely afford. And then you have like Monster and Red Bull showing up in their like monster trucks that are totally tuned out. They cost them more to decorate one of their trucks and fit it. We made an entire year, and they've got a fleet of them. We're just like,
how do we cope?
Let us do this?
Yeah. So, from a revenue standpoint, where did you peak? So you shut the business down in when, 2008 or 9?
2008 is when it actually closed. Yeah, we got rid of inventory right by the end of the year.
When did you peak between 2000 and 2008? What kind of revenues did you peak at?
There might have been a couple years where we topped $100,000 or so in revenue, but it was never anything to write home about. I mean, it never made money. Like, we were always spending more than we made, and a lot of that was production. Like, the production runs were expensive, and every run we did, basically the costs went up maybe 5 or 10%. Like, it just kept getting more and more expensive, and it actually became harder and harder to get it made, because when we started, a lot of the co-packers were willing to take a gamble on us because we were one of the few energy drinks out there. We had the capital to pay for the run, and they saw that. But as it grew, there were some co-packers that we used where Monster came in and said, hey, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and buy 100% of your line time.
Yep.
Because they were making so much. So then all of a sudden, we couldn't use that co-packer anymore. We had to go find a new one. And that happened on multiple occasions. So there were times when for like 5 runs in a row, it was always at a different place, which meant I couldn't just say, hey, run us. I'd have to go there and oversee the run the first time to make sure that it was coming out right.
Mm-hmm.
And
because they're a new company, and you just had to, so it was taking a lot of your time, and it was probably more expensive for the business as a cost.
It became harder and harder to get it made too, for sure.
Okay, so could you take us through the wind up, when you started to come to the realization that this is not working, I'm going to have to shut down. It must have been painful, but you may have seen the writing on the wall, but you were, perhaps emotional and passionate about it. But what was the journey like towards wind down?
It was not all that long of a process. It was basically, what led to it was we ran out of money. Like, we didn't have enough money to fund another production run, and none of the investors wanted to put more money in. So at that point, you're like, all right, well, I can try and blow out the remaining product and do one more run. But the reality is, if we haven't made a profit and made this thing work in 6.5 years or 6 years, it's probably not going to work. And so at that point, it was just a matter of like we owed a lot of money. And so it was contacting some of our suppliers and saying, hey, look, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to be able to pay you. And it was not huge. Like, we had always paid for our production runs, but it was things like some of the shipping companies and some of our warehousing companies. We had these, we're talking about like a few $100 here, maybe $1,000 to one. So it's not like we stiffed anybody for a lot. And we called and explained, it's just like there was nothing we could do. We just did not have the money to pay it. So that was the tough part, was calling these people that had trusted us with this and giving us terms, and they were like, I'm really sorry, not going to be able to pay you. But as far as the wind down process goes, it was just, we called our distributors and said, hey, we're not going to be able to supply anymore. And then, of course, some of them said, all right, well, they just kind of left, and we never got paid. But
yeah. What kind of toll did it take on you emotionally?
Man, honestly, I tend to not take any of this stuff personally. So it sucked, but at the same time, it was also a huge relief, because it wasn't fun. Like, the fun part for me was in the first year and a half, like getting it up and running, this exciting new project and all that. And at that point, once we had a product and that was running, the fun part to me was trying to develop or come up with new product ideas that might work better or sell better, and which was a distraction also. But that was what was exciting to me. So trying to like sell an energy drink in this business and figure out the distribution, like I kind of figured it out early in that it really sucks. Like, the whole distribution and sales cycle of a food product sucks. It's just miserable. And and I say that from my point of view, and I feel like, and I can give you a ton of detail as to why, like a lot of reasons why. And I don't want to sound overly negative, because there's people that make it work, and I think the people that make it work have a product that helps them make it work. And I'd love to touch on that before we finish this.
Okay.
Is why our product didn't work. Even though I thought it was a great product, there's a lot of reasons why it wouldn't gain traction. But as far as like the emotional toll, honestly, man, it was more of a relief. The tough part for me was having to go and tell my friends that had invested in my family that, like, look, guys, I'm really sorry. We're all going to lose money on this.
Yeah.
But you can't work anymore.
Didn't work, no. Let's talk about the failure point. Exactly why. Let's just try and deconstruct or just unpick what was the number one reason, in your opinion, it didn't work. Just reflecting 8 years ago, more or less.
The biggest reason, probably, if you wanted to sum it up, is we couldn't afford to compete. So you have an industry.
You needed more funding.
Oh man, we would have needed literally millions of dollars.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. So it starts with, there's a lot of reasons that go into why we would have needed millions of dollars to make this particular product succeed. So I feel like we should start with the product, right? Like,
okay.
When we had the sports drink, we actually had a unique product. It was the only one that had a little bit of caffeine, and it was the only one with no citric acid.
That's a powder one, the first.
Powder one, right. Yeah. And so, like, it didn't even taste that great, because I didn't do enough research when I was formulating it. Like, if I had to do that again, that product could taste amazing. But
what feedback did people give you when you gave cyclists, samples? Did they say that it didn't taste that great, or were they polite?
Walking by and they taste the little sample cup between races or whatever, they were like, okay, and I'd explain the benefits, and the benefits were such that it was a compelling enough reason for them to try it. So they'd fill up their water bottle from our coolers, and they'd go race with it, and they'd come back, man, that stuff worked great. Because it actually tasted better while you were exercising. So when you're going at 110% for a race or a hard training, your taste buds become more sensitive. So everything tastes sweeter, saltier, tartar. And our drink was super mild. And so they didn't have to water it down. They could use it at the appropriate concentration to get the full benefits. And so when people tried it with racing, they loved it. And that was what saved us. I still could have made it taste better. But the point is, it worked, and it had a unique selling proposition. So fast forward to the energy drink, and we had basically a Me Too product. Like, it looked different. It was the only yellow can. It was a bright yellow, and everything else was like black and silver. Doesn't matter. It tasted way better. Didn't matter. Had more caffeine. Didn't matter. What mattered was that we were essentially looked and acted the same as everybody else, except that we weren't cool. And so when your customer base is teenagers and 20 somethings, you can have the crappiest product out there. And I mean, like, I've got all the respect in the world for Red Bull, but I've never heard anybody say, yeah, you know what? Red Bull's delicious.
It doesn't taste good. No,
but they were cool. And it just blew my mind, the people that were drinking that product because of the image associated with it. And that's hugely powerful, right? So for us to be able to create that image around a product that was essentially late to the market, even though we were one of the first like 10 energy drinks out, we would have had to spend tens of millions of dollars to try and beat Red Bull at their own game.
Yeah.
So where you see people that came in the energy drink market and succeed, like, so look at what Monster did, right? Monster came out with the 16-ounce product. Monster was owned and may still be by Hanson's beverage company. Well,
how many ounces is a standard Red Bull?
Like 8.5.
8.5, so they doubled it. Okay.
So they doubled it. And so Hanson's had a little 8.5-ounce energy drink, and it was sold in like health food stores, which is not where that market's going for energy drinks. So Hanson's developed Monster as a 16-ounce. So all of a sudden you had this huge value proposition. $1 at same price, twice as much. Boom. Killer branding. They spent a ton, and they made a ton. I mean,
so are you saying, like, because getting into the energy market, especially mass market, is a pretty ambitious, idea or concept to have to mind. So does that mean that, if any of our listeners is thinking about going into $1 billion industry, they should have, or they should start to think about from the onset how they're going to finance the marketing of that of that product, so they get sufficient market share to stay to stay active basically as a company.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it for sure. You definitely need to make sure that you've got the financing lined up. But I think before that even, or at least simultaneously with that, you've got to make sure you have a product that matters. And I'll give you one more example that still blows my mind. So you had the small energy drinks came out, then the big 16-ounce cans, and then all of a sudden you had 5-hour energy in the little shots.
Yeah.
And that one, not only did they give you like a fifth of the volume, but they charged more for it. Those were selling for like $2.99.
Yeah.
And those guys blew it up. And still, and it's because it was different, right? So
Why?
Whereas we came in with the same thing, these other guys came in with something that was different enough that they could attract attention.
It's almost like an espresso as compared to, say, a cappuccino or a latte.
Yeah.
The 5-hour energy. But why did 5-hour energy, make the impact it has? Because I from the last time I heard it, it's $1 billion, company, drinks company. Why? What's the reason?
I don't know. I mean, for me, from a consumer who places value on what they're spending their money on, to spend more money for less product makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
But I think people just like that quick shot, right?
Yeah,
like
it's an espresso. Just take it in. Yeah.
And what's crazy is, this is kind of a side note, is that they did somehow such a good job with like the worst ads ever possible. And to this day, the last time I checked was a few years ago, they still owned 85 or more % of that market share, despite Red Bull and Monster and all these other big companies trying to get into that energy shot space. Mm-hmm. They absolutely own that. The other thing they did, which was brilliant, was they put the little display stacks up right by the register too. So and they did
that was I picked up on that. That's a massive strategy, and those colors just stand out really when you think about it. Just tracking back to what you said about Monster and Red Bull, to be honest, right? Just differentiating on size might not be sufficient enough to prove that your brand is better than another brand. So case in mind, the 16-ounce of Monster and Red Bull. Do you think Monster did any other thing to sort of prove to the market that we taste better, or we're a better brand, and we also have double the volume. You get double the value, from a Red Bull, from a can of Red Bull.
I think they probably didn't have to do a ton to market the value proposition because it was obvious. You can get $2 for this or $2 for this, right? But they dumped a ton of money into X Games type stuff and athlete sponsorship, top level athlete sponsorships, which again costs a lot of money. So
they might have gone 100 million in from an investment. We obviously don't know the numbers, but they'd have gone tens of millions in initially, but they'd have had a very, very elaborate and detailed marketing and branding plan, I suppose.
Yeah, and they had the resource to do it. And honestly, the other key thing they had was they had distribution, right? Like Hansen's already had distribution for their products. So that gave them a huge leg up on all these other hundreds of energy drink startups that had no distribution.
Right.
And so one more example for people who are thinking about like products, so the value proposition is one thing, but it was the same price. And so people would still buy, there's customers out there that were drinking 2 and 3 of these things a day, right? So one of the startups that came into the market late was Buku. And what their unique thing was, I think they may have started in 16 ounce, but eventually they went to 24 ounce cans, and they were 99 cents, which, so you've got kids that would drink that stuff, and a lot of like, I don't know how to classify this, but it's like some of the construction worker guys or the truck drivers, right? Like they'd stop in, normally they'd buy a few. So what happened was the volume would be huge on these initially because 99 cents, right? For a huge 24 ounce energy drink. But what the retailers figured out pretty quick was that they were losing money because people went from buying 2 or 3 $2 energy drinks to one 99 cents energy drink.
Right.
So you can't make that up in volume. The retailers were losing money selling that. So that one, it went like this, and then it went like that.
Flat
and now,
out.
about the only place you'll find that, if it's even still around, is in the dollar stores.
Right.
So it's kind of like it's just something to think about when you're pricing your product is the consumers might love it, but if the retailers are going to lose on the way you price your product, then you're gonna have a hard time.
It seems like Monster have executed it the best because they retained the price. They didn't crash the market, basically the price. They didn't crash the price, but they just doubled the volume. So that value is still there. People will be encouraged to buy 2 cans or a 6-pack of Monster versus a 6-pack or a can of Red Bull. So they retained. What about Relentless? Is Relentless in the US or because Relentless is similar to Monster here in the UK?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, very, very similar value proposition. It's perhaps European. Okay, right. This sounds really, really interesting. Okay, should we sort of summarize? You did mention in your notes that you spent money foolishly. We've talked about that. You assumed the consumers and buyers cared about the wrong things. So let's talk about distribution before we wrap things up. Distribution. How can listeners or entrepreneurs in the drinks space take the right distribution, the right moves into distribution? What should they think local or should they think national? And what's your take and what's your philosophy on distribution at the moment?
Well, I'll tell you, when my dad listens to this, he's going to tell you that he told me this all along, was start local, start small, right? Because especially if you have limited resources. I think before you even look at that, and this is maybe one of the most important lessons I would have learned, wish I would have learned, or things I would have known before I started was like understand the landscape, understand the distribution and sales landscape. We had no idea, right? Like we were used to bike shops where we could call up the owner of the bike shop and get them to say yes. So this is going to be a long way to answer this question, but if you don't understand what you're getting yourself into, then you don't even know how to act. And so we went into this thinking, we'll just go around to some convenience stores. We'll get them to carry it. The distributors will say, oh yeah, well, this is a no-brainer. These guys already got 50 accounts open for me or whatever it is. And that worked to some extent. But then what happens is you start to realize how retail distribution works and retail placement. And so I mean, I can literally go on for this for so many different lessons. So I'll try and make it super quick. So when we got into the stores, the store guys, the store owners would say, okay, well, I don't really have any space for you. I was like, well, what, right there, like I'm looking, there's an empty slot right there. Can we just take that? Oh no, that's Monster's slot. I was like, oh, okay, well, what about over there or something? They're like, basically, no, look, see those doors over there? Coca-Cola pays for those doors. Pepsi pays for those doors. Everybody else pays, Monster, whatever. They pay for these shelves on these doors and stuff. So essentially, you go into a store and they wouldn't carry you because you weren't paying them. And its slotting fees are, unfortunately, just a cost of doing business. And when you get up into the chains like 7-Eleven or the grocery stores and stuff like that, like the dollar amounts that they want to be in their stores are, you can get into the tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Just buy a slot to place your product.
Would that slot be per month? Would the tens of thousands of dollars help you per month or per year? Do you buy that slot over a period of time?
Yeah, it's negotiated by the retailer.
Okay.
Probably, it depends. Like the big guys. And so the other side of that too is that they might say, oh, well, we don't need any more energy drinks, or we don't need any more of whatever category you're selling. And I was like, okay, well, but like I know, like let's say, so Coca-Cola, and I hate to trash Coca-Cola because I own stock in them, but so Coca-Cola had one called Full Throttle, and it's horrible. It's terrible branding, ugly packaging, tastes god awful, and it doesn't sell. Like the store owners would tell you, yeah, this doesn't sell, doesn't move. I was like, well, why? Can we just replace that? No. Well, why not? Oh, well, because Coca-Cola, if we want to carry Coke, basically you read between the lines and they say, if we want to carry Coke, we have to carry Dasani and Minute Maid and Full Throttle and everything else that they sell. And it was just, that was part of the contract. And so these brands would go in and say, oh, you don't want to carry an energy drink? Okay, well, give me that check back and I'm going to pull all my products out. And the store owners will be, whoa, okay, hold on. Yeah, I need to sell Coke. Fine, give me the rest of the stuff. And it was just this terrible game, and to me it's anti-competitive, but it's just the way it is. And so that was one of the biggest lessons we learned on the retail side. On the distributor side, you've got, for us anyway, we had two different levels of distributor. We had these mom and pop people who, some of them were great people, whatever, but they would bust their butt, 2 or 3 people trying to go around and sell into all these stores, and they just couldn't keep up. They were late paying us, if they could pay us at all. Some of them, they just ended up shutting their doors down and, sorry, we owe you more than 10 grand, but sorry, we're out of here. And we had a few of those happen. And so that's the one side where they really don't have the strength to get into the big chains either. And so if you're not you could be in all the little tiny C stores all around, but if you're not in like the 7-Elevens and the Quick Trips and whatever Wawas, whatever you have in your particular area, you're just not going to do all that well.
How do you get the footfall? How do you get the eyeballs? Most especially, the awareness. Distribution awareness is key, and then the sales, obviously.
Yeah, and so the flip side of the distribution is the big guys, and for the big guys. For us, were the beer distributors, because obviously Coke and Pepsi weren't going to touch us because they had their own products. So the beer distributors were kind of like the only big distributors we could go and get. And so we, and I'm eternally grateful to our local Miller distributor because they took a chance on us after we had enough stores to make it worth their while. And so they brought us in, and it's just like sales they never grew. We never opened new accounts unless we personally went out and opened the accounts for them. And then the product would stay in there for the most part. So finally, one day I took their sales manager to lunch. I'm like, all right, what's going on? Like, we're not growing at all. What can I do to incentivize your team? And he looked me straight in the eye. He's like, nothing. I was like, well, why aren't you guys selling? He's like, look, our guys go into the store every week. They walk directly into the back of the cooler. They look to see what's missing. They write it down on their notepad. They take it to the front. The guy signs off. The next day, our driver shows up and fills the slots. I was like, so you don't even have to sell? He's like, no, we don't have to sell. We go in and we figure out what's empty and we replace it. I was like, well, what can I do to get your guys to go and sell? He's like, nothing, because my guys aren't going to spend 5 minutes to go in there and try and push something and promote something that they might sell 2 cases of, when they can walk in the back and write an order for 50 cases of Miller Lite, right? Like, there's no point.
Just the way it is, yeah.
So you've got to be able to find somehow a distributor that cares, or figure out a way to get in the store with people who care. And in our case, the people who cared didn't have the power to get it into the stores. The people who didn't care.
Right. Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Okay, just to summarize, what I've sort of picked up from this in terms of the pillars, if we were to sort of structure this out in the pillars of, creating a successful drinks business, you need to think about the product. And on the one hand, your product has to be different and special, in one hand, without actually undercutting, the market. Then your pricing needs to be on point. You don't want to undercut the market, and you don't want to be too expensive. And then the other would be the promotion. This is really like the 4 P's of marketing. Where your promotion has to be on point. A lot of your competitors had, deeper pockets with regards to promotion, and then the distribution is really key. You had issues with your distribution. Are there any other sort of pillars? Do you agree with those pillars, or?
Yeah, the thing I'd add about the product is, you could do it 2 ways. Like for us, you could do it different. Like I mentioned the examples of Monster and 5 Hour coming into the category differently. Or the other one is just make your product matter, right? Like for us, if you look at who our customer base was, our product didn't matter at all. And one of the ones that I look at that was really successful, that I was impressed with at the time, was Honest Tea, right? So Honest Tea, you come in, and that's a crowded market too, right? You've got Lipton and Snapple and Arizona Tea and all these other ones that you're competing against. And so they did it differently, but they also did it in a way that mattered, right? Like, so if people wanted something that was less sweet, that was the only option. So it was different, but it was also that message of like, not so much sugar, just a little bit sweet for refreshing. That to some, there was a customer base that mattered to. With the energy drink, nobody cared that we were healthier or better tasting. It's just
okay, that makes sense.
We cared about
the and I suppose in your promotion, you need to sort of emphasize, why your product actually matters. Okay. Well, so this is...
Make sure that it matters. That's the key.
Okay, make sure.
You make sure it matters to the people who are going to spend their money on it.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, it's been a very, very, very interesting, conversation, Tyler. We're going to wrap up now with our lightning round. I ask my guests these questions, 5 questions in every single episode. They just require a single answer.
Cool.
Ready when you are.
Go for it.
What are your future plans?
So Bike Rumor, still doing that and loving it, trying to figure out how to grow the audience on that one. And then I also just launched the Build Cycle, which is my way of almost doing what you're doing, is interviewing founders to hear their startup stories and kind of provide those in a way that are inspiring to future entrepreneurs.
Okay. How do I get to Build Cycle? What's the website address?
You can type in thebuildcycle.com.
Thebuildcycle.com. Okay. All right. I'll link to it in the show notes. Thebuildcycle.com. Okay. How do you hire people?
So for Bike Rumor, what we do really is they end up coming to us. So the 2 guys that I have full time and some of my best contributors are people who just emailed out of the blue and said, hey, I like what you're doing. We'd love to write for you. We've put out a few calls, say, hey, we need writers. And we end up getting some people that are like super excited at first. We get them all set up. We say, here's what you got to do. And then they just disappear. So for us, really, it's the best ones that we have are ones that contacted us because they were genuinely interested in contributing.
What's been your best mistake to date? By this I mean a setback. It's the entire show. We should listen to the entire show. All right.
I don't know. I think the overall best lesson I've learned is to spend money more intelligently, because man, with both the sports drink and the energy drink, dude, I blew so much money in so many stupid ways, and I'm still paying for that. Like the dumbest thing was when times were really tight with the energy drink, we saved the money for production and what marketing we could do. So my wife and I started paying our salary off of our home equity line,
right,
and not logging that correctly into QuickBooks. And so we're still paying that off, because when it came time to close up, the investors were like, we feel for you, but that's not in QuickBooks. That's not legit expense.
It didn't come out from the business. So yeah. Ouch.
Yeah. So like, it's been 8 years now, and I'm still paying off a home equity line that we used to live off of.
Ouch, yeah. Okay, right. What one piece of advice would you give to people keen on building their food and drink, business?
Oh man, it's a pretty broad category, so there's so many different things. So like the general piece of advice would be to go back to just like make it different or make it matter.
Make it different, make it matter.
If it doesn't, it's just a Me Too product, and it's a commodity. Which
is a recurring theme on with all of the food brands that I've interviewed so far. All of the food brands, I've talked about. They're all kind of different. They have their unique taste, which earns them the spots on the shelves of stores. Okay. One last question is, if you could choose a single book or resource that has made the highest impact on how you view building a business and growing a business, which would it be?
It's probably going to sound cliche at this point, but 4 Hour Work Week by Ferriss. And the reason why is, it's like, for me, the most important reason why I do my own thing is because I value my freedom too much.
Absolutely.
To sit in somebody else's office working for somebody else. And that book, it's even though I was kind of already doing my own thing when I found it, like, it just sort of reinforces the idea that you can, and it spurs so many different, and I could do this, and what if I try this? Like, there's so many ideas in there that, man, if you're thinking at all about doing your own thing, that book should like light a fire under your butt.
I absolutely agree. Do you travel?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Nice.
We bought an RV last year, and on the road almost every summer with the family for like 5-6 weeks.
That's fantastic. Great lifestyle. Great lifestyle. Okay, Tyler, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You've been brave, super, super brave, coming in to share your failures. Seriously, I've got failures, and you would need to put a gun in my head for me to tell them to you in public. But, most especially, a lot of people listening to this will not make those mistakes you made. So the impact is actually greater, rather than you beating your chest, talking about your successes. So I really, really appreciate your time and your knowledge you shared with your experience. And I hope to get in touch with you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I hope it was helpful. I'm not sure I should be honored to be your first guest that talks about how I failed, but I appreciate the opportunity, man.
You'll be the first of many. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for listening. There would be show notes to this on 2X e-commerce. Drop me a line as to who you want me to talk to, what you learned from this episode. I would ping it on to Tyler. Tyler, by the way, what's the best way for guests to get in touch with you if they have any questions or want to learn more about the build cycle?
So it's they can hit me up. I'm at Tyler Benedict on all social media and everything. I'm at the build cycle.
Tyler Benedict. Okay. All right. Cool. Fantastic. Do have a good one. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks. See ya.